When my neighbor Karen first slid her silver SUV halfway into my open garage one afternoon, I thought it was a joke. The kind of weird misunderstanding you laugh off later. She waved from the driver's seat, smiling like we were old friends instead of neighbors who'd barely exchanged nods. I'd been repainting a workbench, and before I could even ask what she was doing, she cut the engine, hopped out, and said, "I'll only be a minute, I just need some shade." Her tone wasn't sheepish, it was commanding. Like the space already belonged to her. I stood there with a paintbrush dripping gray onto the concrete, trying to figure out if she was insane or just really confident. That was my introduction to what would become a 2-month war over 6 feet of driveway concrete. Our HOA was one of those suburban microgovernments that loved enforcing rules about mailbox colors and grass height, but apparently, it had nothing to say about people parking in someone else's garage. When I complained to the president, a retired accountant named Mel, he shrugged and said, maybe she thought it was communal? Which was absurd, because I had a giant motion sensor light, a tool rack, and my name stenciled on the floor. Still, I tried to play it cool. I told Karen nicely, too nicely, that I preferred to keep the garage clear. She laughed and said, "You've got so much space. I'm just using the corner for a quick grocery unload. Be neighborly." Then she strutted back to her car like she'd settled it. The next morning, her SUV was back, and this time she'd parked fully inside. I tried the passive-aggressive route first. I parked my truck so close behind her that she couldn't back out. She knocked on my door 10 minutes later, furious. "You're blocking me in," she yelled. I said, "Right? Because you're in my garage." She glared, then pulled out her phone and said she was calling the HOA. When Mel showed up later, he looked uncomfortable. "Technically," he said, "the garage is on your property, but the HOA encourages shared neighborly use of communal-looking spaces." Communal-looking? That was a new one. Karen smirked behind him like she'd just won a court case. That night, I started locking the garage. It worked for a few days until I came home from work and found the side door's lock broken clean off. Inside, Karen's SUV was parked again, groceries unloaded neatly on my tool bench. I saw red. I went to her house, knocked, and said, "You broke my lock." She blinked innocently. "Oh, was that yours?" The door was stuck. I thought it was jammed. Her tone made it clear she wasn't apologizing, she was daring me to escalate. I said I'd be calling the police. She laughed. "For using a neighbor's garage? You'll sound ridiculous." And honestly, she wasn't wrong. The cops wouldn't waste time on that. She'd found a loophole in social sanity. Petty enough to infuriate, small enough to ignore. So I got methodical. I bought a new smart lock with a keypad and camera. 2 days later, I got a motion alert at 2 p.m. The video showed Karen punching random codes into the pad, then trying to wedge a crowbar under the door. She gave up after a few minutes, but the audacity left me shaking. I sent the video to the HOA. Mel replied, "We discourage installing unapproved smart devices on visible exterior surfaces." Not a word about Karen's break-in attempt. That's when I realized the HOA wasn't going to help. If anything, they'd side with her. Karen had that kind of energy, syrupy charm wrapped around entitlement. She brought cookies to every meeting, flirted with Mel's wife, and made sure every complaint I filed looked like overreaction. When she couldn't access the garage anymore, she started parking across my driveway instead. Always with an excuse. Delivery trucks were blocking my spot, or, "It's only for a second." I began documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, HOA responses. Then one morning I came out to find a bright orange violation notice on my mailbox. Unauthorized modification of property facade. The smart lock, of course. Karen waved at me from her yard, sipping coffee. "HOA rules are rules," she called. I forced a smile and waved back, but inside, something clicked. She wanted control. Every inch of power, every reaction, it fed her. The only way to beat her wasn't rage. It was patience. I spent the next week researching contractors. I found a steelworks company that specialized in security garage installations. I told them I needed a reinforced sectional steel door, inward motorized, and I wanted it fast. They gave me a quote that made my wallet hurt, but I didn't blink. When they asked if the garage was occupied, I said, "It might be soon. Just make sure it closes fast." 2 mornings later, I woke up to the sound of Karen's SUV backing into my garage again. She hadn't noticed the worker's schedule taped to the side door. I waited until she'd gone inside her house, probably grabbing something, and then called the foreman. "You can start," I said. Within 20 minutes, they'd unmounted the old aluminum panels, bolted in the steel frame, and were attaching the new panels section by section. When Karen came outside, she froze mid-step. "What are you doing?" she yelled. I said, "Upgrading my property. HOA-approved materials." That last part was technically true. The bylaws didn't forbid steel. She ran toward the garage, but the crew was already wiring the motor. Her SUV was inside, trapped in plain daylight. "You can't lock me in," she shrieked. "That's illegal." I shrugged. "You parked illegally. It's poetic symmetry." She stormed off, probably to call Mel again. By the time she returned with him 20 minutes later, the new steel door was installed and humming softly, smooth as armor. Mel's face was red with confusion. "You can't just," he started, but I handed him a printed copy of the HOA's architectural rules. Page 6. Exterior materials may include steel, provided color continuity is maintained. He looked helpless. Karen demanded I open it immediately. I told her I couldn't. System calibration period, 4 hours minimum. The contractor backed me up. He wasn't lying, they were still syncing the motor app. Karen's face twisted into silent fury. She paced up and down the driveway like a caged cat, shouting legal threats, HOA violations, and eventually just, "You'll regret this." When the crew left, I locked the new steel door with my app and sat in my living room, sipping coffee while her muffled voice carried through the walls as she argued with Mel outside. Her car was still inside my garage, shiny and trapped, just as entitled as she was. I didn't feel bad. Not one bit. She'd spent weeks taking what wasn't hers, assuming no one would ever stand up to her. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing: I always play the long game. By the next morning, the whole neighborhood knew about GarageGate. You could feel it in the way people slowed their morning walks when they passed my driveway, pretending to tie their shoes while stealing glances at the steel door. Someone even snapped a picture and posted it on the HOA's private Facebook page. The caption read, "New fortress on Maple Lane, overkill?" I didn't need to check who left the first comment. Karen. "He locked my car inside without warning. Isn't that illegal?" she wrote. Within minutes, she had half a dozen sympathetic replies from her usual cheerleaders, the ones who lived for drama as long as it wasn't their own. But the other half were practical neighbors who'd had their own run-ins with her. Comments like, "Why was your car in his garage?" and "Wait, you parked in someone else's property?" began stacking up. The thread turned into a war zone. By the time I checked it, the post had been deleted, probably by Mel, who hated public conflict. Still, the damage was done. Karen came storming to my porch around 10 a.m., red-faced and shaking. "You humiliated me," she hissed. "You've trapped me in my own community." I leaned on the doorframe, calm as ever. "Correction, you trapped yourself. I just closed the door." She jabbed a finger toward the garage. "Open it now." I shrugged. "Sorry. HOA says I can't tamper with an ongoing installation until the safety inspection clears." Total bluff, but she didn't know that. Her voice cracked. "That's my vehicle. I have errands." I looked over her shoulder and saw Mel walking up the driveway again, clutching his clipboard like it was a security blanket. "We need to de-escalate," he said nervously. "De-escalate," I said. "Then tell her to stop escalating into my property." Mel sighed. "Let's be reasonable. She's under stress. Family issues." That was his go-to line for every one of her tantrums. Karen folded her arms, glaring like a queen betrayed by her court. "This is harassment," she declared. I could almost admire her confidence. She said it like she genuinely believed it. I turned to Mel. "Tell you what, I'll unlock it at 5 o'clock. Gives me time to ensure everything's calibrated." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. "Or," I said, "you can keep shouting and make it 6. That shut her up. She spun on her heel and marched away. The moment they left, I opened the garage remotely. Her car was fine. I even left the interior light on to prove it. I wasn't cruel, I just wanted to make a point. But Karen, being Karen, couldn't let the humiliation fade quietly. She spent the rest of the day canvassing the neighborhood, spinning her version of events. By sunset, she'd told at least 3 people that I'd barricaded her inside with industrial equipment. One woman asked if I'd welded her car shut. I didn't bother correcting them. Sometimes silence adds more weight than denial. That evening, I got a letter taped to my front door. Notice of HOA investigation. Inside, it accused me of malicious installation of an unapproved security barrier. I laughed. The wording was pure Karen. She must have dictated it herself. I called Mel immediately. "Who wrote this?" I asked. "It's a formal inquiry," he said carefully. "We just need clarification." I said, "You've seen the bylaws. Everything's compliant." He sighed. "You're technically right. But she's threatening to take this to the city. Maybe if you apologize." I hung up mid-sentence. That night, I checked the garage camera feed again. Around 11 p.m., the motion sensor pinged. Karen was back, crouched by the side panel, flashlight in hand. She was photographing the serial plate, probably to dig up permit info. Then she noticed the camera. Her face froze mid-frame. For one perfect second, she looked like a kid caught stealing candy. I couldn't resist. I turned on the garage light remotely. She jumped, dropped her phone, and bolted. The clip became my new favorite piece of security footage. The next morning, I got creative. I printed a large sign and taped it above the new door. "Private property. Access requires permission." Beneath it, I added in smaller text, "Unless you're Karen, apparently." It was petty, sure, but after weeks of her antics, I'd earned it. Within hours, she was outside again, pacing, phone to her ear. I imagined her calling Mel, then probably the city inspector, maybe even the police. She cycled through her list of imagined allies. No one came. Instead, 2 HOA board members dropped by around noon. Dan, who managed landscaping contracts, and Ellen, who handled legal correspondence. They both looked uneasy. "We just need to verify the situation," Ellen said. "Karen claims you installed a vehicular imprisonment device." I almost laughed. "It's called a door." Dan examined the steel panels, nodding. "Honestly, this is cleaner than most of the neighborhood upgrades. I might get one myself." Ellen gave him a warning glare. "Regardless, we have to mediate. She's threatening to file a civil complaint." I smiled. "Perfect. Then I'll countersue for property damage, unlawful entry, and emotional distress." Ellen blinked. "You're serious?" "Absolutely. I've got camera footage, timestamps, and repair invoices. Her car was in my garage multiple times without permission." Dan muttered, "She's gonna hate hearing that." The meeting ended awkwardly, but as they left, I could hear Ellen say under her breath, "He's not wrong." That afternoon, I took my victory lap, quietly. I finally organized the garage the way I'd wanted for months. The steel door made the whole space feel like a vault. I rearranged the tools, hung a pegboard, set up a charging station for my power tools, and finally felt peace in my own property. Until I heard tires crunching behind me. Karen again. She didn't even get out this time, just rolled down her window and yelled, "Enjoy your little fortress while you can." Then she sped off, tires squealing like a teenager's tantrum. For a few days things were calm. Too calm. I should have known she was plotting. On Friday, I received an official letter from the city's code enforcement department. Complaint received regarding unauthorized construction blocking emergency vehicle access. There it was. She'd gone nuclear. The inspector scheduled a site visit for Monday. My stomach tightened for the first time in weeks. If they sided with her, they could force me to remove the door, and I'd be back to square one. That weekend, I prepared. I gathered every receipt, the permit number from the contractor, photos of the garage interior showing there was no safety hazard. I even called the contractor himself, who confirmed everything was up to code. "Don't worry," he said. "City inspections love my work. You'll be fine." I believed him, but Karen had a way of twisting narratives. I knew she'd be there, waiting to intercept the inspector with her manic charm. Monday morning, right on schedule, a white city truck pulled up. The inspector, a woman named Diana, stepped out, clipboard in hand. Karen was already outside, waving dramatically. "Over here. That's the house," she called, pointing at me like I was the villain in a soap opera. I walked over calmly, holding my paperwork. Diana gave a polite nod. "We received a complaint about a possible obstruction." Karen jumped in before I could answer. "He sealed my car inside. He welded that monstrosity shut." Diana turned to me. "Is that true?" I smiled faintly. Her car was voluntarily parked in my private garage. I installed a new door, fully permitted, with no structural alterations. "I can show documentation." I handed over the file. She flipped through it, her expression neutral but attentive. "Everything seems in order," she said after a minute. Karen blinked. "What? You're not even going to?" Diana raised a hand. "Ma'am, this installation is compliant. In fact, it's higher quality than most residential setups." Karen's voice rose an octave. "So he can just trap me whenever he wants?" Diana's eyebrow arched. "You can avoid that by not entering his property." It was a clean, surgical takedown. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. She tried to argue, but Diana was already walking back to her truck. "No violations here," she called. After the inspector left, Karen stood in the driveway, stunned. For once, she had no words. I walked past her, unlocked the garage, and pressed the button. The steel door lifted with a satisfying mechanical hum. Her SUV glimmered inside, untouched and pristine. I stepped aside. "You're free to leave," I said. She hesitated, glaring, but climbed in without a word. As she reversed out, I added, "Next time, try asking first." She drove off, tires squealing again, and for the first time, I felt like I'd truly won a round. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to retreat gracefully. She was the type to wait, watch, and strike back harder when you least expected it. And I had a feeling her next move would make the steel door seem like the easy part. A week passed before the next attack, but it came dressed in civility. Karen showed up at my door wearing a bright floral blouse and the kind of smile that looked surgically forced. She held a Tupperware container of cookies like a peace offering. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she began sweetly. My instincts flared. She never did anything without an angle. "You mean the foot where you trespassed, vandalized my property, and filed false complaints?" I said. Her smile twitched. "Oh, come on. We're neighbors, not enemies. Can't we move forward?" I took the cookies, inspected them, and said, "Are these poisoned?" Her laugh was brittle. "You're funny." She glanced toward the garage like she couldn't help herself. "That door really is intense. Doesn't it feel a little, I don't know, prison-like?" "Perfect," I said. "Keeps the criminals out." Her expression flickered. I could almost see the frustration simmering beneath the politeness. "Well," she said finally, "since you're so into security, maybe you should check your HOA record." Then she pivoted and strutted off, her sandals slapping the walkway like punctuation marks. When I logged into the HOA portal that night, my stomach dropped. 3 new violations had appeared, each neatly typed with photo evidence attached. Unapproved signage. Improper lawn edging. Non-standard mailbox light fixture. All trivial, but together they added up to hundreds in fines. The photos were clearly taken from Karen's front yard. I could even see her SUV's side mirror in one of them. She'd gone from nuisance to bureaucratic sniper. I emailed Mel immediately, attaching the photos and asking if he really thought this was a coincidence. He replied 2 hours later. I understand your frustration, but violations must be addressed regardless of source. That's HOA speak for, Karen runs the gossip circuit, and I'm too cowardly to cross her. So I paid none of them. I knew that would enrage her more than anything else. The next morning, she was waiting by her mailbox when I left for work. Ignoring the fines, she called out. That's not smart. I smiled. Neither is parking in other people's garages, but here we are. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're clever, don't you? I know I am, I said. She made a strangled noise, half scoff, half growl, and stomped back inside. By Thursday, I found a bright orange sticker slapped on my steel door. Pending violation review, structure subject to removal. The sticker had no signature or reference number. Pure theater. She'd made her own fake violation notice. I peeled it off, scanned it, and forwarded it to Mel with the subject line. Forgery now? His only reply was, please refrain from escalating. That was the moment I realized I'd been fighting Karen under HOA rules, but she wasn't playing by rules at all. She was playing by chaos. So I adapted. I set up a second camera, this one disguised as a porch light, and positioned it to cover her entire driveway. Not for spying, but for proof. Because I knew her type. Sooner or later, she'd overreach again. And 2 nights later, she did. Around 2 a.m., my motion alert buzzed. On the screen, Karen appeared in a hoodie, creeping along the fence line. She carried a metal rod, maybe a screwdriver, and crouched near my utility meter. My pulse spiked. She fiddled with something for a minute, then scurried off. When I went outside the next morning, I saw it. My power meter cover had been pried open, and one of the seals was missing. That crossed the line from harassment to sabotage. I called the utility company first. They confirmed someone had tampered with the lock, and that it was a serious offense. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. 2 deputies showed up within an hour. Karen came out mid-visit, pretending to be concerned. Oh my goodness, what happened? She asked in her best step-forward tone. I showed the deputy the footage. They watched silently as Karen, unmistakably Karen, jimmied open the panel. One of them looked at her and said flatly, "Ma'am, is this you?" She hesitated for one beat too long. "That could be anyone," she said weakly. The deputy pointed out her monogrammed sneakers, visible in the video. "Coincidence," she muttered. They issued her a warning and noted it for potential trespassing charges. As they left, she glared at me, face red and trembling. "You didn't have to involve the police," she spat. "You broke into my utilities," I said. "You're lucky I didn't press charges." She shouted after me, "You'll regret this." I turned back calmly. "You keep saying that. You must really want it to come true." Over the next few days, things went oddly quiet again. No new fines, no notes, no stickers. But then small inconveniences started piling up. My trash cans mysteriously vanished the night before pickup, only to reappear down the street. Packages got lost. HOA letters stopped reaching me entirely. I later found them stuffed inside my garden hose bin. She was going for psychological warfare now. Death by 1,000 annoyances. Then came the package. Friday evening, I found a large box on my porch labeled HOA delivery. No sender. Inside were 4 gallons of bright orange traffic paint. And a note. "Maybe paint your door something neighborly this time, smiley face." That was her style. Passive aggression with a hint of sociopathy. I smiled anyway. She didn't realize she was feeding me ammunition. That night, I drafted an email. To HOA Board. Subject: Pattern of harassment. I attached every screenshot, photo, video still, and letter I'd collected since the first incident. 8 attachments in total. I didn't rant. I presented it like a legal case, calm and factual. Then I ended it with, "If this continues, I'll be consulting an attorney about HOA negligence in addressing criminal harassment." I hit send and went to bed satisfied. Saturday morning, the board called an emergency meeting. That never happened unless someone was panicking. Mel called me personally. "We need to talk," he said. "In person." I walked into the community hall that afternoon to find 5 people sitting at a long folding table, faces serious. Karen was there too, of course, wearing sunglasses indoors like a celebrity at a DUI hearing. Mel cleared his throat. "We've reviewed your claims and the footage. It's troubling." Karen leaned forward. "That video is fabricated. He's editing footage to make me look bad." I said, "Sure, and I'm secretly a Hollywood director with too much time on my hands." One of the board members, Ellen, interrupted sharply. "Enough. The video is clear, and your behavior is not acceptable, Miss Perkins." Karen flinched at hearing her last name used formally. It stripped away her illusion of control. Mel continued, "We're issuing a formal HOA reprimand for harassment and trespassing. One more infraction and your membership privileges will be suspended." Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't do that." "We can," Ellen said. "And we are." I thought that would be the end, but Karen didn't believe in endings. That night, just as I was about to go to sleep, a loud metallic clang echoed from the garage. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera feed, and froze. The steel door was vibrating like someone had hit it with a hammer. Then I saw her shadow dart across the driveway. She'd actually come back, at midnight, to vandalize the door. I turned on the floodlights and sprinted outside. "Karen!" I shouted. She stopped mid-swing, clutching a crowbar. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The lights made her look unhinged, wild eyes, hair matted, caught in the act. "You ruined my life," she screamed. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy because of you." "You didn't need my help for that," I said. She raised the crowbar again, and I instinctively grabbed my phone. "You're on camera again," I said quietly. That broke her. She dropped the tool, spun around, and ran back toward her house. I exhaled slowly and walked up to inspect the door. Not even a dent. The steel held firm, immaculate, untouchable, everything she wasn't. I filed a police report that night. They came the next morning, took photos, and promised to follow up. When the officers left, I sat on the porch, finally allowing myself to feel it. Exhaustion. Karen had turned a suburban cul-de-sac into a psychological battleground. I wasn't scared of her anymore, but I was tired. Every encounter with her was like wading through poison ivy, mild at first, then burning for days. Around noon, Mel called again. "The board's convening an emergency vote," he said quietly. "On what?" I asked. "Expulsion." Karen's violations crossed the line into criminal. The sheriff's report was the final straw. That afternoon, I watched from my window as Karen's husband, who'd been mostly invisible through all this, loaded boxes into the back of her SUV. She was on the phone, pacing, gesturing wildly. Then, for the first time since this all began, she looked up at my house, not with rage, but something else. Defeat, maybe. Or disbelief that someone she'd underestimated had actually won. As she drove off, the SUV paused at the end of the driveway. I almost thought she'd roll down the window to shout something petty. But she didn't. She just sat there for a moment, then turned and sped away. The neighborhood felt lighter that evening. Quieter. Peaceful in a way I hadn't realized I missed. But as I closed the steel door one last time before bed, I couldn't help thinking, people like Karen never truly vanish. They just relocate their chaos. And somewhere, in another unlucky neighborhood, someone was about to find a strange SUV parked in their garage. For 2 glorious weeks, the neighborhood was silent. The tension that had clung to Maple Lane like humidity finally lifted. Kids rode bikes past my driveway again. The retirees resumed their early morning gossip walks without whispering about the garage thing. Even Mel stopped by once, nervously smiling, to say, "Glad things settled down." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But calm like that, after someone like Karen, never lasts. The first sign came in the mail. A thick envelope, hand-delivered, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You haven't seen the last of me." The handwriting was unmistakable, those tight, overconfident loops she always used when writing HOA notices. I showed it to Mel, who sighed and said, "Maybe she's just venting. She's out of the neighborhood now." But there was a flicker of worry behind his glasses. Out of the neighborhood didn't mean out of my life. That night, the motion sensor by my garage pinged again. My stomach clenched as I checked the feed. No Karen, thankfully. Just a strange car idling for a few minutes before driving off. It happened again the next night. Different car, same timing. Around 1 a.m. both times. When I mentioned it to a neighbor, she said, "Oh, probably just Karen's friends checking if you're home. She's been ranting about you on Facebook." I hadn't seen her posts directly, she'd blocked me, but screenshots travel fast in a nosy suburb. One thread showed her claiming I'd falsely accused her of crimes and stolen HOA property by locking her car in my garage. In another post, she said she was consulting a lawyer about defamation and unlawful imprisonment. People had mixed reactions, half cheering her on, half reminding her she'd literally broken lock. I ignored it at first. The smart thing to do after winning a war is to stop fighting ghosts. But then, one morning, I woke up to find my lawn covered in garbage. Not random trash, my garbage. The bags had been slit open and scattered across the yard, food scraps everywhere. It looked deliberate. I checked the camera footage again. 3:47 a.m., a car rolled up, headlights off. Two people got out wearing hoodies and gloves. One was definitely Karen's build. The other moved slower, broader shoulders. Probably her husband. They spent 10 full minutes spreading my trash like fertilizer before driving away. I didn't call the police right away. I wanted evidence, solid, undeniable evidence. So I went full detective. I set up an additional camera behind a decorative vent on the garage eave, angled toward the street. Then I added motion-activated spotlights at the end of the driveway. If they tried it again, I'd have enough light and video to make a courtroom highlight reel. And they did try again, just 3 nights later. This time, the cameras caught everything. The car's license plate, their faces, even Karen's ridiculous floral pajama pant. When the lights blazed on, she screamed, dropped a half-empty bag of trash, and sprinted back to the car. The footage was glorious. I sent it straight to the sheriff's office, CCING the HOA board for good measure. The deputies showed up that afternoon. "We've already talked to her before, haven't we?" one of them said, flipping through his notes. "Yep," I said. "And she still doesn't learn." They filed an official harassment report this time. Repeat offenders get more than warnings. She'd crossed into criminal mischief. The deputy asked if I wanted a restraining order. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see what she tries next." He gave me a look that said, "You're enjoying this a little too much," but I didn't care. A few days later, a white sedan rolled up and parked in front of my house. A man in a cheap suit got out, holding a clipboard. "Are you Mr. Harrison?" he asked. I nodded cautiously. "You've been served," he said, handing me a folder. Karen's name glared at me from the header. Perkins vs. Harrison, civil complaint. She'd actually done it. The complaint accused me of intentional emotional distress, defamation of character, and unlawful detainment of personal property. It even included the garage door incident, but conveniently omitted that her car had been inside without permission. She claimed she'd been trapped against her will for over 2 hours, causing humiliation and community alienation. The gall of it was almost impressive. I called my lawyer friend, Evan, who specialized in property dispute. He read it and laughed. "This is amateur hour litigation," he said. "She's trying to bluff you into settlement." "Then I'll call her bluff," I said. He grinned. "That's the spirit. But you'll need to show she's a serial harasser, not just a bitter ex-neighbor. I sent him the full archive. Videos, messages, photos, HOA letters, everything. By the time he finished scrolling, he whistled. This isn't just harassment, he said. It's obsession. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. Karen showed up with a man I assumed was her lawyer, or a friend pretending to be one. She looked smug, wearing oversized sunglasses again, like she was auditioning for Real Housewives of Maple County. When the judge asked for opening remarks, she launched into a speech about how neighbors should coexist peacefully, not resort to imprisonment and surveillance. My lawyer countered by calmly playing the video of her breaking into the garage, prying open the meter, and spreading trash. The courtroom was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. When the lights came back on, the judge said, "Ms. Perkins, would you like to explain this behavior?" Karen stammered something about fabricated deepfakes, which drew a small laugh from the clerk's desk. The judge sighed. Case dismissed. Then, looking at me, he said, "Mr. Harrison, if she contacts or approaches you again, call the sheriff immediately. And I suggest you file a restraining order today." Outside the courthouse, Karen caught up to me in the parking lot, her facade cracking. "You think you won? This isn't over," she shouted. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I kept walking. "Karen," I said over my shoulder, "you embarrassed yourself. I just installed better lighting." That night, I celebrated quietly with a beer in the garage. The steel door reflected the fluorescent light like a shield. For the first time in months, I felt untouchable. But while victory tasted good, something in my gut wouldn't relax. People like Karen don't just fade, they spiral. Sure enough, 3 nights later, something exploded. Not big, just a sharp crack followed by smoke curling under the door. I ran outside barefoot and saw scorch marks on the driveway. Someone had set off a small firework, right against the garage. The smell of burnt plastic and sulfur filled the air. I called 911 immediately. The responding officer found remnants of the firework casing with duct tape still attached. "Looks like it was thrown or placed here intentionally," he said. "Probably not random kids, unless they like risking felony arson." I didn't have to guess who it was. The officer nodded grimly. "We'll check nearby cameras." The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was the sheriff's department. "We reviewed footage from a traffic cam at the corner," the deputy said. "Guess whose car drove by at 1:12 a.m.? My pulse quickened. "Karen," I said flatly. "Karen." They brought her in for questioning that afternoon. Her excuse was as predictable as it was pathetic. "I was just driving through my old neighborhood for closure." The deputy asked why her car's headlights went dark near my house for 2 minutes. She didn't have an answer. The sheriff's office filed misdemeanor vandalism charges and warned her again to stay away. The restraining order went through that week. Evan called me after filing it. "She's officially banned from contacting you, coming near your property, or driving down your street. Any violation means jail time." I thanked him, but I still wasn't convinced. A piece of paper doesn't stop someone who thrives on chaos, it just challenges them to find loopholes. And, true to form, Karen found one. She didn't show up again in person, but suddenly, anonymous Yelp reviews started appearing about my garage repair business, which didn't exist. One read, "Owner traps customers' cars and installs illegal steel doors." Another said, "Extremely unprofessional, threatened to call police when asked for a refund." They were so ridiculous that most people ignored them, but still, it was proof she couldn't let go. Then came the letter from the HOA again, this time apologetic. Apparently, Karen had been messaging board members under fake names, filing new concerns about my property. They'd caught on after noticing her IP address in the email logs. Mel sounded exhausted when he called. "We're officially blacklisting her from community communications," he said. I should have done it months ago. For the first time since this started, I believed him. Maybe it really was over. I repaired the scorch marks on the driveway, repainted the edges, and even replaced the porch flowers she'd crushed in her midnight tantrum months earlier. Everything looked normal again. Peaceful. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cul-de-sac, I stood outside watching the garage door glide down smoothly, silent as armor. The reflection of the sunset rippled across its polished steel surface. For a moment I thought about the irony of it all, how one petty parking incident had spiraled into restraining orders and courtrooms. All because someone couldn't accept no. Then, as I turned to go inside, I noticed something wedged in the mailbox slot. A single Polaroid. My garage, photographed from across the street, time-stamped just last night. No return note, no message, just the photo. The air felt suddenly heavier. I looked around, scanning the darkening street, but everything was still. Only the faint hum of crickets filled the silence. I slipped the photo into my pocket and locked every door in the house. Karen might have lost the war, but she wasn't finished haunting it. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house made my pulse jump. The Polaroid sat on my kitchen table, taunting me from under a coffee mug. I'd already shown it to the sheriff earlier that evening, but they'd shrugged. It wasn't technically a violation unless she was proven to have taken it herself. Could be anyone, the deputy said. Sure, anyone who had stalked me, broken into my garage, and firebombed my driveway. I'd started keeping a baseball bat by the bed, just in case. By morning, the exhaustion hit. My hands shook as I brewed coffee, and my brain buzzed with paranoia. I kept replaying the night before. Had I missed movement outside? A car idling somewhere? A shadow across the window? The security cameras hadn't caught anything unusual, but I knew better than to trust stillness. People like Karen didn't disappear. They regroup. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have moved when you had the chance. My stomach dropped. I tried tracing the number online, burner phone. No link to her name. But the phrasing, the smug tone, it was hers. I forwarded it straight to the sheriff's office. They said they'd add it to the record. That was the fourth time they'd said that in a month, and nothing had come of it. Around 3 in the afternoon, I noticed something odd. The steel garage door, the same one that had survived her crowbar and firework, was streaked with something dark. I stepped closer. Oil. A deliberate, messy smear from one side to the other. Someone had poured used motor oil down it. My jaw tightened. I checked the cameras again, nothing. Whoever did it had stayed out of frame, probably crouched or used the blind angle near the hedges. Enough was enough. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was hunting. I took the day off work and spent the next 24 hours reinforcing everything. I trimmed the hedge to remove cover. Installed 2 new cameras with infrared lenses. Put motion alarms on the side fence. Even wired a silent alert to my phone that pinged if anything larger than a cat moved within 10 feet of the garage. If she came again, I'd know instantly. But when night fell, the street was eerily quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. I sat by the window with the lights off, sipping cold coffee, watching the feed on my tablet. 11 p.m. came and went. Midnight. Nothing. 1:12 a.m., still nothing. Then, at 2:04, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. The feed flickered, and there she was. Karen, wearing all black, creeping along the edge of my driveway. She was holding something, a small metal canister, glinting in the floodlight. She paused at the garage, crouched, and pressed it against the lower panel. My heart pounded. I zoomed in. The label said, solvent. She was trying to corrode the paint or weaken the metal. I grabbed my phone and hit the emergency line. The dispatcher connected me instantly. "This is Harrison from Maple Lane," I said, voice tight. "She's here again. Trespassing. Damaging property. I have video evidence right now." The dispatcher said officers were en route, but even as I hung up, Karen was moving fast, spraying something onto the keypad, then the side hinges. I stepped outside quietly, keeping to the shadows of the porch. The moment she turned her back, I spoke. "Looking for a new hobby, Karen?" She froze. The canister slipped from her hand and rolled onto the pavement. You scared me," she stammered. I walked closer, my phone camera recording. "You've been warned to stay away. Multiple times." She straightened, her bravado snapping back into place. "You can't own the whole neighborhood. Everyone's sick of your fortress." Her voice was trembling but loud enough to draw curtains from a few houses. "I'm protecting my property," I said. "Something you've never understood." Then headlights swept across the street as the police cruiser turned the corner. Karen's face drained of color. She hissed, "You called them again?" I said nothing. The officers pulled up, stepping out calmly but with authority. She started babbling instantly. "He threatened me. He's harassing me. I was just walking my dog." She looked down and realized she didn't have a dog with her. One officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, is that your solvent canister?" Within 5 minutes, they'd cuffed her. She shouted protests, but it was done. They found residue from the chemical on the garage door. It was industrial-grade paint remover, strong enough to eat through steel over time. One of the officers turned to me and said, "She's not getting off with a warning this time." I nodded, finally letting the adrenaline subside. Karen spent the night in county holding. The next morning, Mel called me, voice shaking. "She's in jail. The sheriff just informed us. The HOA board is issuing a permanent expulsion from all neighborhood functions and communication channels." He paused. "I don't think she'll be back." For the first time in months, I exhaled properly. I cleaned the solvent streaks, checked every lock twice, and, when I was sure she wouldn't walk up the driveway again, I took a nap in the sunlight that poured through the living room window. But peace is never simple when it's built on the ruins of someone else's obsession. 3 days later, I got another letter. This one was typed, not handwritten. It came from a law office, Perkins Legal Associate. At first, I thought it was Karen's family bluffing. But the letterhead was real, the tone professional. "Our client intends to pursue civil damages related to unlawful recording and privacy violations." It was signed by her cousin, apparently a small-town attorney. Evan, my lawyer, laughed when he read it. "This is pure theater. She's using family to keep the feud alive." He drafted a sharp response threatening countersuit for harassment, legal fees, and defamation. That ended it, at least officially. But the weirdness didn't stop. A week after that, I noticed my mail piling up again. Not missing this time, but duplicates. Every bill, every notice, delivered twice. I called the post office. The clerk sounded puzzled. "Sir, someone's been submitting change of address forms for your property. We caught it this time, but you should file a fraud alert." Karen, again. Even from outside the neighborhood, she was still pulling strings. At that point, it stopped being fear. It became fascination. What made someone like her tick? Was it control? Ego? Maybe she couldn't handle being outmaneuvered by someone she thought was just another quiet pushover. I started writing it all down, dates, incidents, emotions. Not as evidence, just documentation. It helped. Turning the madness into a story gave it shape, and shape meant control. By late spring, the case against her was officially closed. The sheriff confirmed she'd accepted a plea deal for vandalism and trespassing, 6 months probation, a fine, and mandatory therapy sessions. The officer added, almost cheerfully, "She's moving out of state. Arizona, I think." I almost laughed. The desert would eat her alive. That night, I toasted my freedom with a cold beer in the garage again. The steel door gleamed under the light. It wasn't just a barrier anymore, it was a monument to survival. I'd won not because I fought harder, but because I never played her game. She thrived on chaos, I thrived on patience. A few weeks later, the new family moving into her old house stopped by. A young couple with a toddler and a puppy. They introduced themselves warmly, said they'd heard, a little drama happened with the last owner. I smiled. "Nothing you need to worry about. Welcome to Maple Lane." The husband nodded toward the garage. "That's some serious setup you've got there." HOA didn't mind. I grinned. They used to. Now they love it. Life slowly stitched itself back together. The neighborhood BBQs resumed, kids ran around with sparklers, and the steel door became more of a local legend than a symbol of paranoia. Even Mel started joking about it. If Karen couldn't break that thing, he said once, it's probably tornado-proof. But then, because fate loves irony, one last reminder arrived. A small padded envelope, no return address, postmarked from Arizona. Inside was a toy-sized model car. Same color, same make as Karen's SUV. A note tucked underneath read, "Thought you might miss me." I stared at it for a long time, then started laughing. Not hysterically, just a dry, weary laugh that felt like closing a book after the final chapter. I put the toy on the garage shelf, next to the security monitor, where it still sits to this day. Because maybe that's what people like her are. Unwanted souvenirs from battles you never asked to fight. You don't erase them. You just put them somewhere safe, where they can't do any more harm. And every time I hit the button and that steel door hums shut, I'm reminded of one simple truth. Boundaries only matter if you enforce them. By summer, peace felt almost normal again. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue instead of motor oil and paranoia. I could step outside without scanning the street first. The new neighbors waved every morning. The HOA newsletter featured bake sales instead of disciplinary meetings, and even Mel seemed lighter, as if Karen's departure had lifted a curse from the whole subdivision. I started rebuilding my routines. Early jogs, weekend repairs, evening beers by the lake. It felt like life before the chaos. But trauma has a long half-life. I still checked the cameras every night before bed. I still locked the steel door twice. And when the wind rattled the hedges just right, I'd feel a pulse of adrenaline before reminding myself she was hundreds of miles away, on probation, in Arizona. Or so I thought. It started with a voicemail. The number was blocked, the voice distorted through static, but the words were unmistakable. "You'll never feel safe in that garage." Then a click. I replayed it 3 times, analyzing every syllable. It could have been anyone, but it sounded like her. That slight nasal emphasis on the word safe. I called the sheriff, who said to ignore it unless more messages came. "She's under supervision," the deputy said. "Could be someone messing with you." Except it wasn't just messages. A few days later, I noticed a white SUV parked across the street late at night. Not her model exactly, but close, same shape, same glint of chrome trim. It idled for 20 minutes, then drove off without headlights. I convinced myself it was coincidence until the same SUV appeared the next night. Same hour. Same spot. I mentioned it to Mel the next morning. He frowned. "You sure you're not just noticing patterns? After everything?" "It's not paranoia when you've been right before," I said. He nodded reluctantly. "I'll ask the neighborhood watch to keep an eye out." That evening, when I came home from work, something was off. The mailbox door was open. Inside was a single envelope, plain, no return address. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Inside was a photo, grainy and clearly taken from a phone. My garage door. But this time, the reflection on the steel showed a figure. Tall, feminine outline, holding a camera. I felt the room tilt for a second. It couldn't be her. She was under a restraining order in another state. Still, the image was too deliberate to dismiss. Evan, my lawyer, told me to report it immediately. Even if it's not her, it's someone acting on her behalf. That's a violation. The sheriff's office logged it, but without identifying features or a visible license plate, it was just another entry in the growing file. They sent a patrol car to loop the block that night. Nothing. 2 nights later, the cameras caught something. Not her, at least not clearly. A person in a hoodie, face covered, walked up to the steel door and placed something against it. Then they left. No hurry, no panic. Calm. Intentional. When I went outside the next morning, I found it. A magnetized sticker, plain black, perfectly centered. I pried it off. On the back was a small QR code. My pulse spiked as I scanned it with my phone. It opened a private YouTube link titled "Remember Me?" The video was less than 10 seconds long. Footage from my own camera system, replaying the night Karen first tried to pry open the side door months ago. Someone had hacked into my security archive. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just obsession anymore, it was escalation. I spent the next day reinforcing everything. Changed all passwords. Replaced the router. Switched to an offline recording system. Evan urged me to document every single event. If this continues, we'll request a digital harassment injunction, he said. But that night, I didn't need digital evidence. I got something worse. Around 2 a.m., my phone vibrated with a motion alert again. The camera feed flickered to life. Static at first, then focus. The white SUV was back. This time, it stopped right in front of my driveway. The driver door opened and a woman stepped out. She moved like Karen. Slow, deliberate, that same posture of entitlement even when she thought no one was watching. My breath caught. She walked toward the steel door, paused, and ran her hand across it as if testing the surface. Then she looked straight at the camera. Her face was partially shadowed, but her smile, that smug, razor-thin smirk, was unmistakable. I called 911 instantly. "She's back," I said. "She's outside right now." The dispatcher told me officers were en route. I stayed on the line, watching her. She didn't run. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, staring at the lens, smiling faintly, until the red and blue lights appeared down the street. Then she turned, calmly got back into the SUV, and drove off. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. They took my statement, reviewed the footage, and confirmed it was indeed her. Same height, same build, and the SUV's partial plate matched the one registered to her husband. The deputy looked genuinely baffled. "She's not supposed to leave Arizona," he said. "That's a violation of her probation. We'll issue a warrant." I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Every noise set me off. Even the hum of the fridge sounded like footsteps. But by the weekend, the sheriff called back. "We found her," he said. "She's back in custody. Caught in Nevada heading east. Looks like she was trying to come back here." Relief washed over me, heavy and slow. It was over again. Or at least, I wanted to believe it was. But there was something in the deputy's tone, something that said this story wasn't done. A few days later, I learned why. Mel stopped by my house looking pale. "You should see this," he said, holding his phone. He'd been scrolling through the HOA's private Facebook group again. Someone had shared a post from a new account. The name was different, but the writing style was painfully familiar, over-punctuated, passive-aggressive, full of half-truth. The post read, "Beware of neighbors who trap others behind steel walls and call it justice." Dozens of comments followed, arguing, speculating. Some defended me. Others wondered aloud if maybe Karen had been driven crazy by harassment. I told Mel to delete the post, but he said, "We can't. The account's under a VPN. It keeps reposting from new names. It's like she's haunting us digitally." That phrase stuck with me, haunting. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Even from states away, she was finding ways to crawl back into my life, pixel by pixel. So I did something I hadn't done before. I went public. I posted the entire timeline. Photos, letters, videos, police reports, on Reddit, under r/entitled people. I titled it, HOA Karen tried to park in my garage, so I installed a steel door while her car was inside. It was half catharsis, half warning to anyone dealing with a suburban tyrant. Within 24 hours, it blew up. Tens of thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. People called it karma, a masterpiece of petty revenge. But more importantly, it went viral enough that Karen's version of events, her fake posts, her whisper campaigns, got buried under the weight of public mockery. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Evan. "You're trending," he said. "Apparently your stories made its way to a local news outlet." I laughed. Let them run it. Maybe she'll finally see herself from the outside. And she did. According to the sheriff's report that came a month later, Karen's probation officer found screenshots of the Reddit thread printed and marked up in her notebook. Underlined, circled, annotated like evidence of betrayal. She'd been obsessively following every comment, every share. When questioned, she said, "He made me famous for the wrong reason." That was the last official update I ever got. Summer rolled into fall. The steel door still stood strong, no scratches, no oil stains, no fireworks. I finally started parking my car inside again, something I hadn't done since the early days of the feud. Every time I hit the button and the door sealed shut, the sound was comforting, a mechanical heartbeat of closure. Still, sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the reflection on its surface, wondering if someday I'd see another outline behind me, wondering if people like Karen ever truly stopped, or if they just paused long enough for you to lower your guard. Then, one evening in late September, I came home to find something small sitting at the edge of the driveway. A single cookie, wrapped in plastic, placed perfectly in the center of the concrete. No note, no crumbs, no footprints leading away. Just the cookie. I didn't touch it. I didn't call anyone. I simply watched the security feed later that night. The footage showed nothing, no one placing it, no vehicle pulling up. Just the cookie appearing between one frame and the next, like it had blinked into existence. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it wasn't. I threw it away and closed the steel door one more time, listening to the soft, steady hum as it sealed the world out. And I realized, with a strange, calm certainty, that peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's learning to live unshaken while chaos waits outside, wondering why you're not afraid anymore. Winter came early that year. Sharp air, gray skies, and a silence so thick it made the whole neighborhood sound muted, like someone had put the world on pause. The maple trees along the cul-de-sac stood bare, skeletal fingers reaching for nothing. Most houses had already hung their holiday lights, blinking with the forced cheer of suburbia trying to pretend it was safe again. Mine stayed dark. After everything, I wasn't in the mood for decorations. It had been 3 months since the last incident. The sheriff assured me Karen's probation had been extended after her unsanctioned trip across state lines. She was required to check in weekly with local authorities and was barred from all contact, digital or otherwise. I believed it, mostly. But sometimes, when I sat in my garage at night with the hum of the heater and the slow ticking of the metal door cooling down, I'd still feel it, that phantom pulse of paranoia. The sense that the story wasn't finished. Then one morning, the HOA sent out an email. Neighborhood safety audit, mandatory attendance. The meeting was scheduled for the coming Saturday at the community hall. Final review of property security concerns, it said. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, they wanted to talk about safety. Still, curiosity got the better of me. When I arrived, the hall was half full. Mel waved me over with that tired smile of his. "We figured you'd want to be here," he said. On the table up front were printed reports, legal updates, and something unexpected, a stack of letters. "What's all that?" I asked. "Mail," Mel said. "Forwarded here from out of state. Addressed to you, actually." I picked one up. The envelope was postmarked from Phoenix. My name was scrawled in looping cursive. Inside was a single sentence. "You never built a garage, you built a cage." No signature, but the message was clear. The other envelopes said similar things. Variations on guilt, twisted metaphors, and attempts at control. Every fortress is a prison. You're trapped behind your own steel. I just wanted to park somewhere safe. Mel sighed. We intercepted these before they hit your mailbox. The return address doesn't exist. I rubbed my forehead. You've got to be kidding me. She's not breaking probation technically, he said. Mail isn't considered contact if it's unverified. I stared at the pile. So she found another loophole. The meeting droned on about fence regulations and parking limits, but my mind was elsewhere. Those letters weren't just harassment, they were bait. Karen was trying to remind me that she still existed, that even from hundreds of miles away, she could make me flinch. But what she didn't understand was that fear, once dissected enough times, loses its teeth. That night, I sat in the garage again, staring at the steel door. The heater buzzed softly. My reflection looked older, a little hollow around the eyes. I took one of the letters from the stack and read it again. The handwriting wasn't quite the same as before, trembling, uneven. Maybe medication or stress or just desperation. The tone was different too. Less venom, more obsession. It didn't sound like revenge anymore, it sounded like someone talking to a ghost. 2 weeks passed. Nothing new. The cameras stayed quiet, the mail stopped, and the HOA slipped back into its usual pettiness about lawn ornament. Then, just when I started to believe it was truly over, I got a call from the sheriff. "Mr. Harrison, we thought you should know, Karen Perkins passed away last week." For a moment, I didn't process it. What? She suffered a stroke. According to her family, it was sudden. She was at home when it happened. I sat down hard on the nearest stool. The words didn't feel real. After everything, months of conflict, police visits, lawsuits, viral posts, she was just gone? No showdown, no closure, no apology. Just silence. The sheriff continued, "We found something during the cleanup that might concern you." Her brother turned over a box labeled with your name. "Would you like us to deliver it or destroy it?" My first instinct was to tell them to burn it. But something, morbid curiosity maybe, made me say, "Send it here." It arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered by an officer. A plain cardboard box sealed with layers of tape. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, and a thick leather-bound notebook. The photos were of my house, angles I didn't even know existed. Driveway, garage, backyard, my truck. Dozens of them, taken over months. The clippings were printouts of the viral Reddit story, circled and annotated in red pen. Beside some lines, she'd written things like, "He twisted it. Not true. They'll believe me eventually." And then there was the notebook. The first few pages read like diary entries, rambling about neighbors, HOA meetings, the unfairness of the world. But halfway through, the tone shifted. She started writing directly to me. "You think you're calm because you're clever. But calm is just another kind of weapon. I only wanted to be seen. You made me invisible. Every rule I broke because you made rules first." I didn't know what to feel, anger? Pity? It was madness laid bare. Somewhere between grievance and confession. By the final pages, the handwriting had deteriorated into jagged scrawls. The last line stopped me cold. "The steel door doesn't keep me out. It keeps you in." I closed the notebook and sat there for a long time, listening to the faint hum of the house. The heater clicked off. The silence pressed against my ears like weight. Over the next few days, I tried to move on again. I boxed up her things, planning to hand them over to the sheriff, but one photo kept nagging at me. A shot of my garage door taken from across the lake behind the neighborhood. The angle didn't make sense. The reflection on the steel showed something strange. A silhouette standing beside me that I knew hadn't been there when the picture was taken. The timestamp said 3 a.m., a time I'd definitely been asleep. I told myself it was distortion, maybe glare. But a part of me, the part Karen had infected, wondered if she'd been closer than anyone realized, watching in ways I couldn't see. A month later, the new year rolled in. The neighborhood hosted a block party. Fireworks burst over the lake, laughter spilled into the streets, and for the first time, I joined in. Someone handed me a beer, and I toasted with them, feeling lighter. When I got home around midnight, the garage looked different in the pale glow of the fireworks after light. So normal, so peaceful, I almost forgot the madness that had unfolded there. Until I noticed the note. It was taped dead center on the steel door, fluttering slightly in the wind. My heart thudded as I peeled it off. The paper was clean, crisp, and smelled faintly of smoke. 4 words, written in careful, deliberate script, The cage is empty. I spun around, scanning the street. No one. Just the echo of laughter from the party and the fading sparkle of fireworks above the trees. I stepped back inside, locked the door, and stared at the note in my hand. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was neater, colder, like someone trying to imitate her. I reported it, of course. The sheriff came, took photos, and left shaking his head. Probably a prank, he said. Someone online read your story and decided to mess with you. Maybe. But the timing, the precision, it didn't feel random. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake listening to the wind hum through the eaves. At one point, I got up, went into the garage, and just stood there. The steel door glowed faintly under the security light, smooth and perfect. I pressed my palm against it and whispered, "You can't hurt me anymore." Then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the door, came a sound. Not loud, just a soft metallic click, like fingers brushing steel. I froze, every nerve firing. I stepped back, watching the surface. Nothing moved. The cameras showed nothing. But I'd heard it. I was sure. I stayed there for hours, waiting. Dawn finally broke, sunlight spilling through the small window above the workbench. The sound didn't return. Maybe it never had. Maybe it was all in my head. Spring came again, and with it, new projects, new people, new stories. Life moved forward, as it always does. But I never took down the steel door. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me of something most people never learn until it's too late. Sometimes the monsters you fight don't live next door. They live in the quiet corners of your mind, whispering in familiar voices, reminding you of battles you've already won but can't stop replaying. And sometimes, when the night is too still and the house too quiet, I swear I can hear that soft metallic click again. Not a threat, not a haunting, just an echo. A reminder that once, someone tried to turn my peace into a prison. And I turned it into steel instead.